Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Bundesliga Show. We're back with another Bundesliga Derby Day dive-in, and this one has a bit of a special twist to it because it may or may not involve Mark's beloved FC Nuremberg. One of our many Derby Day dive-in shows, which a lot of people enjoy. So we basically kind of go a little bit deeper into looking at many of the brilliant derbies that go across Germany. Recently, we've been kind of diving into some of the derbies that kind of come outside of the Bundesliga. We don't just want to concentrate on that. We want to explore everything that is going on across Germany, and this is another brilliant one. So today, we will be covering the Frankenderby, otherwise known as the Franconian Derby, which covers, obviously, between FC Nürnberg and Greuther Fürth. Obviously a very interesting one. We'll be able to get a brilliant perspective from you, Mark, of course. Before we get started, please do, as per usual, give this video a like, comment, let us know, what you think of this derby once you get a bit more information on it. Let us know if you support Nuremberg or if you're a Fürth fan, dare I say it. And of course, please do subscribe to the channel. We'll kind of crack on with it then, Mark, and we'll get into a bit of a brief history then on what this kind of derby means to everyone, obviously around in the Bavarian area and obviously in Nuremberg. You can kind of really get us into the nitty-gritty of this one.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's start off with the brief history. Yeah, I mean, it literally doesn't get any bigger than this in Germany. The Frankenderby, or I think that's the best place to start, really, to describe why it's actually called the Frankenderby. Because as Rory mentioned before, officially both of these clubs are based in the heart of Bavaria, but the derby is called the Frankenderby. So yeah, a bit of history on that. Like, Bavaria is basically split into two parts. You've got like the traditional part of Bavaria, which is like Munich, Augsburg, obviously two big football clubs down there, Regensburg as well, and obviously the Alpine region as well on the border of Austria. But then you've also got the Franconian region, or Franken as they call it in Germany, and like obviously there's a big history behind it. But like the people in Franconia consider that the Bavarians kind of like stole their province and kind of brought it into Bavaria. They believe that they should be like their own Bundesländer or state or county, as they say in Germany. That's why it's known as the Frankenderby. And basically, all people in this region consider themselves Franconians, not Bavarians. It's a little bit like in the UK, we have similar stuff like Wiganers. People from Wigan are officially Greater Manchester people, but they consider themselves to be Lancastrians. It's a little bit like that, I guess, for any of you Northern English people out there. But yeah, absolutely. And this is, as Rory said, one of the most historic derbies in Germany. This derby goes back a long, long way, over 100 years to be precise. The two clubs are undoubtedly the biggest two clubs in the Franconian region, only kind of rivaled by the Würzburger Kickers and Bayreuth as well. But let's be honest, those two sides they pale into insignificance next to the might of FC Nürnberg and Greuther Fürth, really, in truth. I see Rory's wry smile on that one, yeah, but that's for sure. Okay, let's talk a bit about the history, as we say, of the derby. So yeah, a bit of history about the clubs as well, and about the towns in general. Actually, an interesting point is that the first ever German railway was actually opened between Nuremberg and Fürth as well. And it was actually built by the British, incredibly, as well. So there's your connection between the towns, and obviously the British connection as well. But yeah, more about the football clubs. Actually, FC Nürnberg was founded in 1900, so 122 years of history. Fürth was actually founded in 1903, so 3 years later. The club wasn't actually founded as Greuther Fürth as it's nowadays known. It was called TV 1860 Fürth at that time. Actually, nice, interesting name over there. Yeah, but obviously the rivalry after the formation of Greuther Fürth, it quickly became a big rivalry because of the proximity geographically of the clubs. Only 6 kilometers separates Nuremberg Center and Fürth Center. So you can see You know, that there's no kind of like land border between them. The two towns just kind of run into each other, basically. And, you know, you're driving along the road and all of a sudden you're in Fürth, basically. There's no kind of like countryside between the two towns. I think like the main part of the kind of derby was actually probably in the 10s and the 20s, the 1910s and 1920s. This was when the two clubs were dominating Germany. They were effectively the Bayern Munich and Dortmund of the 1910s and 20s over in Germany. And basically, as we say, that the clubs were fighting on all fronts for the top trophies in the game. I think there's a few anecdotes that everyone in this part of the world knows about, basically. I'll take you through a couple of them. And in 1921, after the fallout of the First World War, the clubs were really, really at the top of German football, and they were unrivaled in their position as the biggest two clubs in Germany. And in 1921, the German national team actually played like an international match in the Netherlands, in Amsterdam. And obviously at the time there were no planes, so they had to go by train at that time. And there's a famous story that there were two carriages on the train, and because there were so many players from Nuremberg and Fürth, pretty much the whole team was made up of Nuremberg and Fürth players, and the Nuremberg players all sat in the front carriage while the Fürth players sat in the back carriage, and they had no like camaraderie or conversation between each other at all. There was absolutely no no love lost, so to speak. And then actually it was a Fürth player who opened the scoring in that game, and he famously was only congratulated by Fürth players as well, despite scoring for the national team. Brilliant story from 1921, 100 years ago, literally, that story. But everyone in this region knows about that one and loves to recite that story. Another great story was the fact that in the 30s, Hans Futter, who was a player for Greuther Fürth, was actually forced to leave the club, like literally forced to leave just because he married a woman from Nuremberg. Wow. So I think you can see really the kind of level of the rivalry between not just the football clubs, but also the towns as well. Obviously very, very closely. And even now to this day, you know, whenever Nuremberg and Fürth play, you cannot get a ticket for that game. Like in Nuremberg, 50,000 sells out the day that the tickets go on sale for this derby, whether it's in the second league, the third league, or the Bundesliga. It doesn't matter. This is the hottest ticket in town. And absolutely. It's I think, but that pretty much takes us through like the history and the background of the clubs and the derby. So Rory can take us on to the balance of power between the clubs.
Yeah, indeed. Very, very interesting hearing those stories and anecdotes. Obviously sounds to me like a derby, obviously kind of born out of fire straight away by the sounds of it, Mark, like from a very early kind of age had this kind of ferociousness to it. Maybe not quite the likes of like the Berlin derby is just kind of getting going now, isn't it? Like we've kind of found out, but it's very interesting to find out a bit more about the history. The balance of power. So again, as we've mentioned, this is a really big derby in Germany. It's a really long-standing rivalry. And so as you can imagine, the two teams have played against each other a lot. And in fact, they've played against each other 268 times. So obviously a huge amount of times that they've played against each other. Obviously, you know, it's the oldest top-level derby in Bavaria, and it's the most played football contest in Germany as well. Obviously, with so many games, it's not a surprise. So obviously, you know, they played each other a lot. And so where does the power kind of fall? So at the moment, we've got, as it stands, 139 wins for FC Nuremberg, and 47 draws, and a further 76 Greuther Fürth wins. So obviously, you know, that does stretch more onto your team, doesn't it, Mark? Nuremberg have obviously got a heavier proportion of games won. It's quite interesting looking into the kind of detailed stats about it, though, because there's been a lot of games played between the two teams that are kind of categorized as other, which obviously kind of fall outside of the Zweite Bundesliga, Bundesliga, the Uberliga look like structures back then. So I'm not sure whether they kind of count as friendlies or different kind of structured kind of competitions or something, but very interesting to see that. With maybe if you took those out, I think it would be a lot more of an even contest. I think with regards to the numbers. So obviously it does look like Nuremberg have had a lot of success in terms of the numbers, but I think it probably is a bit closer. Maybe it looks. So we'll give Fürth that in terms of like the numbers for sure. But yeah, I mean, there's obviously been a lot of big contests between the two teams in terms of like taking big matches, obviously, which we'll talk about in terms of the iconic matches in a little while and things like that. But yeah, I mean, there's been an interesting kind of power switch, I guess, in recent times, maybe. Obviously, they've been playing mainly Zweite Bundesliga derbies in recent times, which I think the balance of power has been fairly towards Fürth. So in the last 14 meetings in recent times in the Zweite Bundesliga, Fürth have actually won 8 of those games and Nuremberg just twice. So that's an interesting statistic there. Obviously, Nuremberg having a much better season this season, but there isn't obviously a Franconian derby to be played next season. Obviously, as we're recording, we don't know what it might be. If there will be one in what division, who knows? But Fürth will more likely be in the Zweite, so we'll have to see about that. But yeah, I think it's a fairly even contest, but Nuremberg certainly got the numbers to kind of back themselves up. And, with such a ferocious derby, the Nuremberg fans would certainly say that they historically have got the kind of, the power to back it up. So that's kind of how the lay of the land strikes with this derby at current. So I'll hand back over to you, Mark, and you can very happily, I'm sure, take us through the trophy cabinets. Obviously, you'll be happier to do the Nuremberg side of it, I'm sure.
Yeah, absolutely. But interesting point about the balance of power. Since I came to Nuremberg in 2018, like Nuremberg haven't beaten Fürth as well.
Wow.
Yeah. So a lot of people say I'm actually a bad luck charm for Nuremberg because they've only won one game that I've seen in the stadium out of about 12 matches. So yeah. And that was my first ever game against Bochum as well. So yeah, hopefully I can start to bring them some more luck in the coming time. But anyway, that's a bit off topic. So let's move on to the trophy cabinet. So as you say, I mean, both clubs have definitely had the level of success, but I think, a lot of people aim a lot of jokes at these two clubs and say, that like their grandmother wasn't even born the time when these two clubs were like dominant in Germany. And let's be honest, it was kind of true as well. Nuremberg have been champions of Germany 9 times, but most of them were in their 20s and also 30s. But it has to be remembered they have won 1 Bundesliga title as well. Obviously, the Bundesliga was founded in 1962, and they have won an official Bundesliga title. I think in 68 it was. Mm-hmm. So yeah, they do have that honor. As for Fürth, they can't say that. They have won 3 German championships, but the most recent one was in 1929. So yeah, I think a lot of stuff's changed since then, that's for sure, so a little bit of time ago. But yeah, actually another little anecdote as well that the Fürth fans always like to talk about. They actually won the championship before Nuremberg in 1914. They got their first championship in 1914, but just a few months after that, World War I broke out, which obviously lasted until 1918, and German football, in fact, didn't have another season until 1920. So literally Fürth were crowned champions officially for 6 years in a row because obviously they won the last championship before the war. And a lot of Fürth fans make a joke and say they should be given 6 titles for that 1 year because they literally won it. Technically they were champions 6 years in a row, but yeah,
nice idea.
That would bring the numbers a little bit closer, that's for sure, if they did get given that. But who knows, in the future that might be given to them. But yeah. Obviously, in terms of the pokals, actually, Fürth have never won a pokal, but Nuremberg have won it 4 times. So yeah,
Okay.
4 pokals for Nürnberg, and actually most recently in 2007 as well. I know a lot of people who were actually there at that final in the Olympiastadion. They talk about that fondly. Rory, you might not be happy to say that they actually beat Stuttgart in that final.
Oh wow!
Yeah, it's a pity we weren't doing this show like 15 years ago. That would have been a real turn up. That would have been, wouldn't it? But actually, Nuremberg famously scored in the last minute in a brilliant 3-2 win, which consequently ended up giving them a European run in the UEFA Cup as well, where they famously played a 2-legged tie against Benfica in the last 16, I think. So they had a good run. Yeah, Nuremberg also have some European pedigree as well. Despite having never won a major tournament, they made the European Cup Winners' Cup semi-final in 1963 and also the European Cup quarterfinals in 1962. So obviously European Cup is what is nowadays the Champions League. So yeah, the quarterfinal all the way back in 1962, when they had a bit of a resurgence in the 60s after a few barren years before that. But yeah, obviously Nuremberg last played in the Bundesliga in 2019 as well. So it's been 3 long years since they were last in the Promised Land. Hopefully they'll be able to change that sometime soon. As for Fürth, they're currently playing in only their 2nd ever Bundesliga season, incredibly. So as you can see, since 1962, when the Bundesliga was formed, not very much success for the Fürth side, and actually their first season was in 2011-12 when they finished 2012-13, my mistake. Yeah, they won the Zweite title in 2012, and then they were relegated in 18th in 2013, when they famously went through the whole season without winning a home game, actually, in that season. And it looks as though, let's be honest, in 2022, they'll be backing that up with another 18th place finish. So as you can see, not the most successful side this century, let's just say, but they do definitely have pedigree and, a very, very good, solid fan base as well that turn up every single game and shout the team home. And yeah, let's just hope that we'll see another Franken derby before too long. That's for sure.
Righto. So back over to me, and what I'm going to do is I'll go through some iconic matches between the two teams. Before I do, just obviously very interesting. A few other kind of bits and bobs to look at. So the first ever meeting between the two teams, we reckon is in the early 1900s. We can't quite pinpoint it. We reckon it was 1905 or 4, and according to Mark's sources, or AKA Mark, Nuremberg won the first ever meeting 15-0. So that is some number that very impressive. So yeah, one to forget for Fürth fans on that occasion. And so yeah, obviously a lot of their meetings did come in the Oberliga Süd. Obviously, kind of around that time after the kind of big successful period, like you said, the 10s and the 20s. I think Nuremberg, there were quite a lot of high scoring games as well. Nuremberg put 10 goals in 2 games past Fürth during one period, I think in the 50s. So it was really a really exciting derby most of the time. Looking at the kind of Pokal involvement, like you said, Mark, Nuremberg have got a good history in terms of winning the Pokal a few times. And I think they've only met in the Pokal, or the DFB Pokal as it's known now, 3 times. Nuremberg winning a first round match on a replay a little while ago, but then Fürth managed to get revenge in the mid 1990s, winning a second round match. But one more iconic game, maybe not for the reasons of the match itself, was the third meeting between the two teams in the DFB, which was in 2011-12. So I think that probably matches up with the season where they got promoted, if that's right, Mark. Yeah, so obviously it was a really good season for them, because they would beat Nuremberg in the 3rd round of the DFB Pokal. So not obviously gaining a really huge win for them in terms of obviously a derby, obviously the latest point that they've met as well in the DFB. The Cloverleafs would go on to the semi-finals as well. So that's probably one of the closest kind of times that they've got to the Pokal. Lost to Borussia Dortmund in extra time to 120 minutes, goal by Ilkay Gundogan. So obviously a really well-known name there. Probably would have been Klopp's era, I believe. So that obviously brilliant Dortmund team. So Gundogan getting the goal.
Gundogan, a former Nürnberg player as well, of course. Yeah.
Oh, wow. Yeah, so that was another stab through the heart, unfortunately, for Fürth. So that's very interesting indeed. One of the first ever matches after World War II, Nuremberg won that 5-3 in 1945-46 season. And they followed that up with a 5-1 home win the following season. This is still in the Oberliga Sud. So again, like I said, high scoring games all the time, really, especially during that period. Maybe kind of a throwback to the way that Fürth have been defending this season, or the first part of this season, because they have been much, much better in the second half of the season, I must say. What else have we got? As I mentioned, in more kind of recent times, we've seen obviously a lot of Zweite Bundesliga clashes, but there has been 2 official Bundesliga matches between the two teams. Obviously, the season, like Mark mentioned, when Fürth got promoted, and they did unfortunately come 18th. It was obviously a season when Nuremberg was still in the Bundesliga, and there was a 0-0 draw between the two teams, and Fürth actually got one of their rare wins, 1-0 away to Nuremberg. So that again, what a plus for the Fürth side, but unfortunately, it didn't really matter as they came rock bottom and Nuremberg finished 10th. So again, interesting statistics there across the board. So bragging rights, but at the same time, Nuremberg fans be able to say, well, you got relegated. So yeah, mainly been Zweite Bundesliga contest since then. As I said, during the balance of power kind of chats, there's been a lot more Fürth success in this recent times, including a 5-1 win for Fürth in 2014-15 with Baba Rahman scoring a brace for Fürth on that day. So some really interesting games that have come between the two teams, and obviously there's a lot of passion behind both these fan bases. So I guess kind of leave with your kind of final remarks, Mark, as to how much this derby kind of really means to the fans, and what your experiences of it have kind of just been since you've been in Nuremberg, really. So you've not been able to get to a game yourself, have you?
No, not between Fürth and Nuremberg, because unfortunately, I think they played twice at Nuremberg since I was here, and one of them was literally about a month after I came, so I couldn't kind of get it sorted. I think the other time, I was on holiday somewhere or something. So, but it's definitely in my plans. It's pretty much a must-do for anyone who lives in this area. They've got to go to a Nuremberg Fürth game, But as I say, the tickets are literally like gold dust. I think it sells out every single time. It doesn't matter how the teams are doing. Literally, they could be like the bottom 2 teams in the Zweite Bundesliga, and there'd still be like 50 odd thousand in the Max Morlock Stadium in Nuremberg. And obviously, Fürth Stadium's a lot smaller. I think it's only like a 12 or 15,000 capacity, so it's even harder to get a ticket over on that end. But yeah, I mean, a lot of people have told me that the atmosphere is just absolutely electric. Each team takes ridiculously high numbers of away fans to each other's stadium, and there's definitely no love lost between the clubs, and there's really a lot of good kind of, a lot of it is like good tempered kind of banter as well between the two clubs. But also on the match days, I know it can sometimes go a little bit too far in some ways, and there is always like fighting basically between the two. No question about that, because as I say, this is a very fierce derby. I would say one of the fiercest in Germany, and the clubs don't like each other, and quite frankly the towns also don't like each other, to be honest with you. Nuremberg's seen as more like kind of glitz and glam, like nicer. Fürth is a bit more like kind of working class type town, if you know what I mean. So again, I wouldn't say you've got like class differences within the clubs, but it's definitely a point, I would say, that's for sure. But it's, I could recommend anyone that wants to come to Germany, you've got to see one of these two teams play, because this is a huge hotbed of football in Germany, one of the biggest hotbeds, possibly outside of North Rhine-Westphalia, where you've got all your Dortmunds and your Schalkes and whatever. It's a massive part of the world for football, and the derby is just so fierce, and it's in everyone's minds in this part of the world, that's for sure.
Good stuff. Well, look forward to catching one very soon, hopefully, on my overdue trip to Germany. Maybe we'll be able to tie it in with that at some point. Who knows? Might get lucky. Right. Well, we'll be able to bring this particular derby day dive into a close. Really, really interesting to get, Mark, your opinions on it, obviously from a Nuremberg point of view, and looking into another really fierce and interesting derby in Germany. So hopefully you guys enjoyed it. Obviously, let us know what you think about the derby in general. Did you like what you heard? Are you interested by one of the number of different anecdotes that Mark told us about? So let us know in the comments about what your thoughts are on this particular derby. So over to you, Mark, to finish up this show.
Yeah, absolutely. So if you enjoyed what you saw today, remember to check out our Twitter feed at @OverTheBarFB and at @OverTheBarExtra. Remember also otbfootball.net. You can see just about everything football related, and that's like the centerpiece of our work here with Over the Bar. Remember to also like, comment, and subscribe, because we're slowly building up towards 500. We hope to have that within the next few weeks, and then obviously up towards 1,000, and then on from there, basically. So keep following what we're doing, and see you next time, guys.